Welcome to today's presentation. We have the pleasure to present Embla Medical. To help us through today's presentation, we are joined by Sven Silverson, President and CEO. You can see here on the front page, it's the first quarter's results and a little bit update on how everything is going. So this is, of course, the main topic for today's event. As always, you can ask questions in the box down below. I will ask the questions in the end. I think we will take a pretty short presentation, and then we will try and get through all the many questions everybody has out there through some questioning. But for now, I'll hand the call over to you, Sven.
Thank you very much, Michael. Thanks for having us here today, and thanks everyone for dialing in. I was gonna go through the big picture here after the first quarter for Embla Medical. We have had a reasonably good start, I would say, to the year. We are growing 4% in local currency, 4% organic sales growth after I would say somewhat of a strong end to the quarter. Our EBITDA margin is also up by 1 percentage point compared to the same quarter last year. When you look at our reported US dollar growth, that's only 1% because we are comparing to a period where the dollar was stronger here in quarter one over the same period last year. But actually here, as of April, the dollar has depreciated, so it's kind of turned around. As everybody is aware of, there's been some fluctuations in the dollar exchange rate. When it comes to our progress on the operational and strategic side, I'm pleased to report that we have a new leader for our R&D, important R&D work. Andre Rocca joined us from McKinsey. He's been with McKinsey for previously a partner with McKinsey. Comes with lots of experience to advance our important innovation work. And on that note, we also moved from what have been in limited launch, our Navi and Icon knees are now moving into more full launch, and we have received some very positive feedback on these products. On the neuro orthotics front, we acquired Fior & Gentz now a year ago in the beginning of quarter one last year, and we're 1 year into our integration efforts, and we continue to move forward on plan and starting to introduce or continue to introduce Fior & Gentz products in new markets, leveraging our infrastructure. On the patient care side, also a new leadership with Conal Hart taking the executive vice president role, previously managing our European patient care business, having previously been in various roles within our organization. We continue to also move forward on the rebranding front, where we are rebranding all our regional clinics into 4Motion, and that is all on plan. With regard to guidance, we are reiterating our guidance, even though quarter one started out a bit slowly. We still maintain our 5 to 8% organic sales growth and 20 to 20% EBITDA margin. There's been a lot of talk about tariffs. Our financial results for 2025 will be impacted by tariffs, but because uncertainty and frequent changes around how these tariffs will actually all play out, we are not putting out a specific number as to the tariffs, but there will be some impact for us on the full year. That's clear, as we've already started to pay tariffs on import on products from China into the United States. And then finally, we reiterated our share buyback program. Just a few notes on the geographical dimension. If you look at EMEA and APAC, EMEA continues to deliver solid growth, 7% growth here when comparing to a very, very strong growth in quarter one 2024. So pleased with that. And also on the APAC front, 30% growth, where we are comparing also to weak performance from quarter one last year, where we had particularly big impact from slowness around the reimbursement approval process in Australia. That is now back on track, and that catch-up effect, or that normalization, if you will, is a substantial part of the growth here in quarter one. as we continue to see a challenging environment in China, which is one of the other main markets in the APAC region. The Americas was declined here in Q1 compared to coming out of a strong Q4. This is mainly, we see moderate growth across our product businesses, while our patient care business was down. Was a reason for our decline. Patient volumes can fluctuate, and also with some uncertainty in the overall environment in the US, patients are likely, when they're able to, maybe postpone treatment, as there is some participation of patients in the overall cost of each and every healthcare event. So that is one of the things that is impacting patient volumes here in Q1. Also, some slowness around reimbursement approvals, particularly with the VA system in the United States. But we still keep our plans for Americas for the full year, despite a slow start here in Q1. I'm going to skip over the detailed business area slides. Just a few words on cash flow, which was strong here in Q1. Well, it's seasonally low, always in the beginning of the year, but good compared to prior period, especially as our capex has come down in line with our expectations, and our leverage is bang on in the middle of our range, also after we have reinitiated our share buyback program here in the quarter. So, Michael, I think I'll pause here just so we have enough time for questions.
There was a question. This low number of patients that you mentioned in your reporting, what is the case? You mentioned a little bit about that. There's a small copay, but I think I have also heard you say around 90% of yours is reimbursed. Is the economic situation really so that they postpone it? And secondly, maybe is there other reasons? And thirdly, I think I've also heard a little bit about weather-related, that the people who are not so mobile or a little bit of the older generation hasn't actually went out to do the stuff that they need to do, but is expected to return. So can you talk a little bit about this copay, whether that really can have that influence, and how long they can postpone it? And maybe the weather also have had some. I know you should never use the weather as an excuse, but
no, that's a good point. I mean, sometimes of course, it can happen that you have periods of difficult circumstances in some states where you have harsh winter conditions that can have an impact on capacity and patient volumes year over year. And we've had some of that in the US here in Q1, but it's not. I won't claim that as a main reason. But going back to the way the healthcare system in the United States works, it is first and foremost, there's no change in what is being paid for. Reimbursement is still there, and even we have more reimbursement tailwind than headwind, going back to what we've discussed a few times in this call, just the expanded reimbursement for low active amputees. However, what we have seen in the US over the last couple of years is kind of some fluctuations within the year, and patients being more willing to incur healthcare costs later in the year when they have better transparency on what their full year cost will be. And so we have seen over the last couple of years this trend of more volumes shifting towards the latter half of the year. I mean, the patients are still there. The underlying maintenance need and an upgrade need and new patients, that none of those patterns have changed from one quarter to the other. So we believe that this is a fluctuation, and we're not changed as of now. We're not changing our outlook for the year. I think that's the best answer that I can give.
And maybe for us to understand on the outside, who luckily doesn't have this, if you postpone it, which you can do if you feel a little bit pressure or want to know your income and so on. How big are the drawbacks? I meaning, will you start feeling less comfortable with your leg if you don't go? Because I think a lot of your business is reoccurring business, right?
Yeah.
Where people are going to the service and getting a new prosthetic sometimes, but a lot of it is this. So I don't know whether you can describe it that you can postpone it if you feel that you are not comfortable right now, but you will start feeling some kind of a discomfort if you don't go to the normal checkups.
Yeah.
How do we understand this area?
Yeah, I would say it obviously depends a lot, sort of case by case. But the reason people come in for maintaining their mobility solutions can be both just wear and tear, just based on activity levels. You have parts of the prosthetic solution, for example, the liners that usually people will use 1 to 2 pairs of liners per year. There can be volume fluctuations in terms of just which can impact kind of how well the socket fits, because the socket is always the customized part that needs to be tailor-made to each and every individual. And for all of us, volume changes can occur in both directions, so that can lead to the need for new sockets. We typically claim that like the feet joints or knee joints should be changed every 3 to 4 years. So there's a lot of reasons why people are coming in for maintenance, upgrades, renewals. But in many cases, these things can be postponed, even if you have some mild discomfort. But of course, it makes a lot of sense to come in and maintain and have properly functioning mobility devices just to maintain your overall health and overall mobility level. So this is by no means optimal, and I would say that the vast majority of those individuals that are dependent on these solutions will come and keep their prosthetic solutions well maintained and up to date.
Perfect. And then there's a question also. Is cut down by the American health authorities, the FDA cut downs. Has that some kind of impact on the short term? And the question is also here, do you fear it could have some impact on reimbursement under the new rules, which, maybe needs a little bit more working to do? It's more a discussion which patients should fit and not fit.
Yeah.
So is there some kind of a fear that are you already seeing some effect that maybe reimbursements are not being processed? And how about the outlook for the better reimbursement rules, meaning that you could target a larger patient population?
Well, I think the outlook for the expanded Medicare coverage remains the same. And we see low active patients being fit with bionic knees, both with our clinical customers and within our own patient care network. So I don't believe that we will see any changes in that regard. It is developing as we expected, just slow and gradual. Remember, our clinical customers, they take the risk, if you will, on ultimately payments being approved by the system. They acquire the components, they incur the work. So there is some hesitance in terms of being first movers in this field. People will want to see some accumulated experience with these new reimbursement protocols, and that is gradually being generated. With regards to the broader picture in US healthcare, no changes have been discussed or suggested that will impact the patient groups that we are focused on in the United States. But there has been some talk around some reform around Medicaid, which obviously covers some of our ultimate patients, but none of that has been formalized, and we don't expect care for amputees to be taken down in the that's not something we expect.
Perfect. And then we can't get around it. The tariffs. Why are tariffs only affecting bracing? As the first question, is the other parts exempt, or you only main part predominantly bracing? If I read your report correctly.
Yeah. Well, there are agreements in place where the United States is also part of those agreements, that stipulate that products that are needed to serve individuals with a long-term disability of some sort or mobility challenge of some sort, and that not just mobility but also other long-term kind of conditions, that those products are exempt from tariffs. And so that will be the case for the vast majority of our prosthetic products, which are to a large extent manufactured in Iceland and partly also in Mexico. So the main effect that we see from tariffs today are products that we source from third-party vendors in Asia, mainly China, and sell into the United States. We've been transparent about our supply chain strategy and setup for bracing and support, which is mainly using our own manufacturing facility in Mexico, and again these partnerships in Asia, again mainly China. So we will see an impact from tariffs, but again we have not communicated any specific impact because both the direct and indirect impacts are still to be seen, and there's been a lot of fluctuation in these tariff rates. So we are still observing and will not in the short term at least put any estimate out there in terms of direct impact, but it, of course it will impact financial performance in some shape on this year.
And if I calculate correct, 17% is bracing. How much of that is US? Is that a large portion of bracing?
Yeah. We've communicated that it is a large part of our bracing business. It is basically these two main pillars, US and Europe, and then a small bracing business in the APAC region. So yes, it is. These tariffs will impact a substantial part of our overall bracing business,
which is around 17%.
Yeah, which is around 17. Yeah, so it's not such that it will have fundamentally changed our business, but with a structural cost change like that, we will see some short-term impact, of course. But what we've also said that we believe that we will be in a position to largely mitigate these extra costs, keeping everything else constant, meaning either to utilize our own manufacturing facility in China or to do other changes in our supply chain. But that requires some visibility with regards to how tariffs will develop in other jurisdictions. So we are now closely observing and evaluating what options we have and what actions are the appropriate ones to take once we have a better transparency on how this will all develop.
And when you get better transparency, and everybody hope we will get that, how quickly can you adopt that? I guess it's a long-term relationship. You have a lot of your suppliers and so on. So I guess you are not fast to jump the gun if the tariffs are changing, but a roughly timeline you can adopt maybe some changes and move it to less hit or maybe not hit at all tariff areas.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, we have done this many times before, shift products from either different suppliers or between our own manufacturing to external partners. So it will depend on product complexity, risk, volume, etc. But I think it's fair to assume that moving a specific category will take anywhere between 12 and 18 months. So therefore, we believe that whatever structural cost change will come as a result of these tariffs in the short term, that we can mitigate a large part of that in the medium long term, whatever assumptions you apply to those timelines.
Yeah, perfect. And then there's a question: how much revenue can you directly attribute to the war in Ukraine and gas? Do you anticipate these markets will grow for Embla in 2025? So do we have any real direct impact, or is it not markets that you actually are exposed to?
I will say yes, we do have some exposure to these situations. And we are a supplier of products in Ukraine. We did step away from supplying prosthetic components to Russia just at the beginning of the invasion into Ukraine. And we communicated at that time that was roughly 1% of our sales. We are now supplying clinics in Ukraine with components. So that is growth, if you will, compared to prior years, but it's not fundamentally changing or driving, you could say, our performance in the Europe region. But it's still growth, obviously, due to a very difficult cause. But we are a supplier to clinics in Ukraine, first and foremost.
Okay. Then what do you expect to improve during the year from 4% year-over-year growth in Q1, potential to the top end of your growth guidance range, 8%? So what is it you hope are seeing and seeing a possibility for changing during the year and improving?
Yeah, I mean, when we set guidance, our assumptions was that our prosthetics and neuroorthotics business would deliver strong growth rates, driven by just, again, the structural growth drivers in our prosthetics business and having new important product launches like the Icon and the Navi and the Proflex Terra, our new mechanical foot, and just continued good progress on the neuroorthotic side, that we would see very healthy organic growth rates in that part of our business, and that our bracing business and our patient care business would largely grow in line with market growth in these jurisdictions. So what we see here in Q1 is that we are well on track on the prosthetics and neuroorthotic side, but have started the year slower in bracing and patient care. But this only being one quarter, we still believe that this is our range for the year, and have decided not to make any changes. But it goes without saying that we need the other two business areas to perform better to deliver within than here in Q1. So that is obviously our assumption, since we still maintain our guidance.
Perfect. Then do you expect to increase the share buyback program if you don't do any M&A? Is the current market situation giving you any new M&A possibilities, or is actually closing some because there's so much uncertainty on the tariff side that you would like that close? So if you don't do it, could you increase your share buyback program? And secondly, a new situation, at least lower prices, a lot on stock markets. I don't know whether it's hit the private market yet, but maybe also a little bit uncertainty on the business model. So share buyback and a little bit on the M&A opportunities.
Well, on the M&A side, we continue to work on and develop our M&A pipeline along three main M&A themes. One being acquiring product technology where we can leverage our global commercial infrastructure to bring these products to more patients. A good example of that is the acquisition of Naked Prosthetics and mechanical fingers that we completed a couple of years ago. And also, even though the neuroorthotics acquisition was slightly different, as we're moving into another chronic mobility field, but again, somewhere an acquisition where we are leveraging our global infrastructure. So this is an important theme for us. Another important theme is to selectively acquire patient care in markets where we're already active, or potentially new markets. And the third theme would be market access from the product side, where we have historically made acquisitions of distribution partners that operate in attractive markets. So we continue to look at opportunity in all these three themes. But you are correct in the sense that with more uncertainty, sometimes in the overall economic situation, it can sometimes be hard to match expectations in terms of valuation. So that's clear. And then tying it back to share buybacks, we will use share buybacks to calibrate our capital structure, and in the absence of M&A opportunities, we will do more. We will evaluate the opportunity to do more share buybacks. So that is how we will do it going forward. Keep net debt to EBITDA between 2 to 3 times. Our preference is to make investments to grow our business But in the absence of those opportunities, we will deploy or utilize share buybacks to regulate our capital structure.
And I guess it is the M&A side that is the unknown and the potential, because if I understand you right, you have been through a heavy investment program, and that is going a little bit down, and you're also guiding for better profitability. So I guess the M&A side is the uncertain. Is that correctly understood? You don't have any big organic investments.
There's always kind of uncertainty with regards to timelines and ability to close on certain projects on it, but our appetite and willingness hasn't decreased or anything like that. But I guess what I'm saying is that there can be some fluctuations, but the share buyback mechanism is a tool to regulate capital structure.
Perfect. And before I leave you, Sven, I'll ask the question I always ended. What do you see as the biggest risk right now on reaching the guidance? If when you wake up, you can only mention one thing. I know it's hard. And for the first time, I think I will not hear actually tariffs, because it seems you have that managed. I know everybody you will be impacted, but maybe it's not tariff, or maybe I'm jumping in front of you and it is tariff. But if you should mention one risk right now in reaching the guidance, what is that in your mind?
Well, first and foremost, I always remind myself and everyone that wants to listen that we are in a market where there's a lot of need for our products and solutions, and that's why, despite all this noise around us, around geopolitics, tariffs, increased economic uncertainty that will impact us as other international companies, but the fact remains that the utilization and access to good mobility devices is low, and that's what we remain just laser focused on meeting that need. But when it comes to our short-term financial performance on growth and margins, if you look at just the slide we previously looked at, when it comes to geographic contribution, a big part of our business is the Americas, and the vast majority of that is in the US. And we've started the year slower in the US than what we had anticipated. So it is our assumption that we will still have a reasonably good year in the US, but there can be scenarios where that will not be the case. And as always, because of just the relative share of US sales, we need the US to do well for us, for our average growth to be where we need it to be.
Check. Thank you, Sven, for taking us through your result and answering the questions and getting a good look through maybe some of the risks out there. So thank you to you, Sven, and thank you for everybody listening in.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a nice day.